4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another episode of the Ready Set Poem Podcast, your premier source for everything to do with the Vancouver Titans. I am Chris at Lightforce, the voice that is in dire need of a haircut. As you can see, it is getting all out of control here. And it is just me right now. For those of you who are tuning into this, third ever post-match review with us at RSP, you've probably come to expect that it is quite possible that Omni at Omni Strafe and Sam at Another Sam Chant may join me at some point in time. We're also exploring the opportunity that we might have a special guest, and or 2 or 3 or 4, how many ever might join us as well. But for the time being, it is just me, Chris, at Lightforce. And I thought we would just dive right on in to what we are going to talk about, and it is specifically the Vancouver Titans falling to the Houston Outlaws 3-0. Now, spoiler alert, which probably should have come before the score, but I'm going to presume if you're happening to watch this right now, you already saw the result. The Vancouver Titans had a rough Saturday. And that's not to suggest that the players themselves obviously didn't play hard. It's just that we didn't see as much as we had seen sort of previously against the Washington Justice against the side that they played today in Houston Outlaws. Going into the weekend, for those of you who listen to the podcast, we had suggested there was a possibility that the Houston Outlaws and the Vancouver Titans might match up better. We talked a little bit about the fact that the Vancouver Titans would have an additional week of practice, playtime, and preparation, something that they did not have going into the previous weekend against both the Washington Justice and the Florida Man. And we had sort of thought that if there was a winnable match, this would be it. Unfortunately, that 3-0 score was much more indicative of the performance than we might have seen the week previous, a 3-1 score against the Washington Justice. There were really, signs that there was an opportunity for this team to turn things around. And even against the Florida Mayhem, the 3-0 loss there, we saw these bright spots. And we thought, you know what? It is very possible that there is something here that with time and effort, we'll be able to go and manufacture a win. I'm going to get it straight off the top. There are still some bright moments that we're seeing. The difficulty is it's going to take probably much more time, much more preparation, practice, and ultimately performance time to make this transition this roster into something better than it is today. So let's kick off. The fight that we saw the Vancouver Titans get into on Busan, the first map of the day, was kind of weird. The Titans themselves were really tied to this idea of a dive roster, and the Houston Outlaws instead trotted out a more traditional double shield with Reinhardt and Sigma. But what wasn't traditional about it is they had hydration, normally their flex DPS, playing main tank. Now, whether or not there is more to that story, only time will tell. We'll talk more about that when we dive into the further details on a regular scheduled episode, the ones that go live on Wednesday at high noon. But what we saw with hydration in play, though, whether it be the Outlaws memeing, taking the Vancouver Titans match as a scrim opportunity, or whatever it happened to be, he comes trotting out and arguably did a pretty decent job. But what we also saw was that with the Titans rolling out Dive, Linkser, who started off on Widow, switched over to the McCree. Another small adjustment, just to ensure that the Widow didn't get outright abused, and Linkser proceeded to outright abuse the Vancouver Titans' McCree on that first map. Unfortunately, the Titans got very little joy, very little coordinated attack, and even when they were to try to go and push, the Outlaws had an answer. Takes us to the second map. And this one was, dare I say, the best opportunity the Vancouver Titans had today to win. They came out strong. They won the initial team fight. They managed to hold the point, I think up until about 60-some-odd%. They had a hell of a stagger. Now, sure, I think it was Karka who was on the Brigida, invested a rally that wasn't the best timed, considering they were trying to fight a stagger. The numbers were well out of opportunity for the Titans to actually continue that fight much longer. And I guess the rally, the idea of the rally is like, oh, we're going to stagger even more. But I would have preferred to have kept that for a future fight. The Titans then were able to take the point back in a subsequent team fight, got a few more percentage points on that, and again, looked to be in a really good position. Alt economy is in their favor. They had an opportunity to go into 1 or potentially 2 full team fights, and they proceeded to roll out a spawn and slow play. The best way to describe it was that they were just taking their sweet time, trying not to make any mistakes, and proceeded to make a bunch of them. You saw Shredlock get zoned out by a Hammond ult, so the little eggs, balls, or bombs, whatever you want to call them, zone him out, he gets melted. You had both support sort of laned off because of this Hammond ult, not really able to get into a fight. When we have a Brigitte that's zoned, she's not all that much effective outside of the few armor packs you can toss in. You also had the other alts not really have any good value at this point. DPS alts aren't really present. And the amount of time that it took for them to ultimately come up with a new plan of attack, suddenly time was up. So not only did the Vancouver Titans lose their main tank and Shredlock straight off the top into that sort of first of what I would have expected to be 2 team fights, they were so passive that they started to stagger themselves and eventually got staggered outright, lost Busan. And that's when things almost fell apart. Now, looking at that particular match, it got me wondering, is there potentially, as this being a new roster, a struggle to sort of define the shot caller, or who is the true leader? Or are there multiple leaders? And if there's multiple leaders, could it be that there's multiple voices that are coming into play? Could it be that the Vancouver Titans are ultimately in this world where there's either 1, too many cooks in that kitchen, too many orders getting shouted out, or 2, not enough, or outright no chef, and everyone's just waiting for someone to pop an order? I don't know. I mean, we're not there, obviously, as part of comms. We did get some insight through a sort of review video the Vancouver Titans themselves published. And we learned from Fluffy that the team itself had very little time to practice. We also got some updates through Suna and the Overwatch French broadcast team that validated how he and KSR are playing with Ping, and they're we know Suna's quite vocal because apparently his neighbors were complaining. But again, it just occurred to me that there was a lot of I'm not sure what to do, and therefore I won't do anything. And when you get frozen like that, nothing good comes from it. I'm a firm believer that aggression is always the answer to everything, and I know it is not. But if you're going to go down fighting, I'd rather fight that aggressive fight and lose than fight no fight and lose regardless, especially when you had ults at hand. So that takes us over to Volskaya. And on Volskaya, the Outlaws sort of adjusted their approach. They brought in a dive for attack, a more solid, what we would have thought double shield for defend, but again stuck with the dive. But the Vancouver Titans now decided to get out of the dive and now go with the double shield themselves. And for one reason or another, they didn't want to adapt. There was really very little adaptation that took place over the course of the weekend, or at least course of today, Saturday, with the Vancouver Titans. And you had Linkser now back on the window, just clicking heads. He essentially got to go wherever the heck he wanted to go on the map with absolutely no one doing much about it. We saw on Volskaya specifically a number of times where Dalton on Echo got either zoned out or completely separated from his team and picked early, subsequently making it much more difficult for the rest of his team to then obviously rally to continue the engagements. And while it seemed relatively easy for Houston on their attack to not only push the first point, but almost quite quickly snowball and get the second point, the Titans themselves bent, but did not fully break. So when the Vancouver Titans were on their attack and we were sort of seeing this abuse happen, they did eventually, in overtime, cap that first point, and then quite effectively roll on to the second point. Again, they weren't able to go and get the same amount of time that the Outlaws had for them, and it unfortunately took, I think, right down to like the last second to cap the point, just so that they actually had a push of their own. But again, the Titans themselves went into the overtime fight without what seemed to be a clear means to adapt to what Houston was throwing in front of them. And, whether it be hydration on main tank, just throwing them for Fitz, who, again, he quite adequately played both as Reinhardt and as Winston quite well. But we saw Shredlock continually get separated from his back line, even KSA to some respect. And and we've talked about this at length. Is it the support structure that they're using, the choices that they're making, in turn not complementing the play style of the tanks up front, or is it the play style of the tanks themselves that's the problem? I don't know the answer to that. It's maybe the two sides of the same coin. But it's a struggle, because when you lose your tanks that quick, or the support themselves get so separated that they in turn go down, whether it be Rolf or Karkar, it just, things, quite quickly fall apart. And in this particular case, the Vancouver Titans, while they did get some joy on that first point, had given the Outlaws far too much time, and the Outlaws, slow played it smart. They poked until they got the appropriate pick, and then proceeded to outright steamroll, and that be that. So, halftime. We've seen the Vancouver Titans here at halftime rally, whether it be the feedback that they're getting from the coaches in real time, the ability to sort of update or modify the strategies and their approach to the actual match itself. So we thought, when we saw the Vancouver Titans, trot out to Rialto, that there would be an opportunity. In fact, the Vancouver Titans themselves looked as if they might be able to put up a solid fight. Didn't happen. In fact, the struggle that I had with Rialto is it felt very much like the Washington Justice full hold on Kings Row, where last week, not the Justice, sorry, the Florida Mayhem. The Florida Mayhem outright abused the Titans last weekend. I mean, Yaki was essentially, having his way with every Vancouver Titan. And unfortunately, this week we had Linkser doing, something very similar. Or hydration, whether or not that pick was memeing or whatever. It's just the Titans themselves did not have the answer to what the Outlaws were throwing. And again, I don't know if this is the plan. I mean, it very well could be like, hey, we're going to go and put into to play different strategies, different approaches with the limited amount of time to scrim, practice, and prepare. We're going to have to actually do that as part of this sort of Mayhem tournament that the Overwatch League is putting on. And I have fair play. That might be the way to do it, and I can't fault them for using this as the opportunity to continue to grow the team. I mean, we've talked about this. This team has hit the reset button. They're going to have to sort of grow up. But it's going to be a tough slog as they go through. I mean, this match against the Outlaws today was the closest of the two that would be winnable. And while, yes, anything is possible, for those of you who didn't catch the Uprising Gladiators fight where the Uprising actually got a win, I'm not entirely sure with the Fusion where the Vancouver Titans go. I mean, they could go outright aggression, but the Fusion are good. I mean, it's possible we might see the Fusion, meme themselves. Maybe Chipsa finally, makes it in, and maybe there's a differentiator to be had there. But the difficult thing is that the Titans themselves, even with their roster, it's only 6. They don't have the ability to go and adjust their lineup or play around with, who's doing what. We already have Suna playing out of position. Today we actually saw when Sombro came in, it was Dalton that was brought in, and that's fine. But the difficulty is, again, there are people who are currently playing out of place, and as a result, are you going to then further shake things up by having people play a role? Absolutely not. So Pearly Gates, you'd mentioned the biggest mistake was to play around Suna's Ash rather than Dalton's Echo. Dalton needed armor packs to be aggressive, but then we played the BAP instead. And that's exactly sort of one of the topics we were talking about in RSP Cord voice when we were watching the game, was that the DPS hero to which they were trying to play around was suspect. We weren't entirely sure if that was the plan or there was some confusion. But then the support picks that they had weren't always in line with the play or the play style that they approached a match with. Like Busan, coming in with Brig, I suppose I understand the value there, especially in the second map where you then had a responsive dive from the Outlaws. But the choices didn't quite align with the capability of the other heroes sort of around the team. The other struggle here is that and I started talking about the 6-man roster, is like, what is needed? I mean, we've already talked about this, flex DPS. And I sort of casually joked today, wouldn't it be cool if the Vancouver Titans somehow figured out a way to get someone like Hydration on their team? I'm not suggesting Hydration's the answer and what's going to get this team off to the grand finals, but Hydration was able to play main tank today adequately well. Now, the asterisk to this is it was against the Vancouver Titans. And the Vancouver Titans, I am a big fan, arguably a work in progress, so can't really evaluate Hydration's play against just that one matchup. But he is also a flex DPS, and that is a role that the Vancouver Titans are missing. So imagine where you had a flex DPS player that in a pinch could flex into a main tank role to provide a different look or just a different play style, one that maybe allows you to sort of further adapt your lineup. You know, anything's possible. And I'm not trying to suggest, again, Hydration is even available or the Vancouver Titans would take a look, but there needs to be more here. We saw this approach from the Titans, you know, even before the roster reset, where they're running such a tight ship. It's like the bare minimum that they need to make things work. But the problem is when they don't work, it leaves you with very little opportunity to experiment or adapt. Again, there might be a desire to have a flex DPS player. Maybe there's a plan to have someone. Maybe there are holdups within contract language or whatever it might be. I have absolutely no clue. But it's surreal that you have 2 DPS players currently playing out of position. And that's good. Like, again, maybe it's like something that is seen by the coaching staff and management that me, myself, the guy sitting in the cheap seats here that runs a podcast doesn't, and that's perfectly acceptable. But I'm not necessarily seeing, you know, that mentioned by anyone else in the scene that I would, you know, define as being far more intelligent than me. So why is that the case? I haven't a clue. It could be a budget thing. It could be the fact that the team itself has spent so much money, you know, leading into the pandemic as it exists, that they are now needing to run a much more tighter budget, and that's perfectly, you know, fine. But the problem is there needs to be more options in this cupboard, and unfortunately right now there's not. Perlegates, it sort of said that it's a bad hero pool for us. You know, we chose to play slower run comps. It's a dive heavy week. Instead, we don't have the synergy run dive in. See, this is the thing. Like, I won't claim to know these players' hero pool very well, and you know, we also have to concede that half and half are new. In fact, you know, technically you have half that sort of know each other, and the other 3 are sort of, you know, disparate parts. But there were those that had suggested that last week's hero pool really, you know, didn't suit us. I'm not going to suggest that this week's was any better. It's just, you know, is it that without the Moira? I mean, I think that was the biggest change that impacted the Titans. But is a Moira Ryan combo what they need? Maybe. I don't know. Rex, you think KSA and Sin are low 2 players? Made a much bigger effort to sign the rest of Caden Higgin, proper Lucia contenders, Sean Carter's not cutting it. So KSA and Suna. With KSA, I mean, obviously he is high tier when it comes to the competitive ladder. I mean, it's, you know, without a doubt an opportunity. As to being a low tier player, I don't necessarily believe he is. I mean, might there be stronger options within the league or even in contenders? It's quite possible. But unfortunately, the Vancouver Titans were not in a position of strength when it came to going and populating a roster. So if we're going to go and see them hit the reset button as they have and experiment, having someone like KSI get this opportunity, think of this as a scouting trip. The painful part is that we as fans, if we're watching the Vancouver Titans, have to sort of, you know, go through these growing pains if that's the case. As far as Suna, I'm not willing to go and say Suna's completely low tier, because we've seen the Vancouver Titans have 2 players, Dalton and Suna, who essentially play very similar hero pools, and as a result, either one or both have to then sort of play at a position to either deal with the meta, deal with the competition, and ultimately, subsequently, deal with the fact that neither one is a flex DPS. I think you play to your strength and have Dalton. I mean, Dalton is, I think, the superior of the 2, based on what I've seen. So you have Dalton play to his strengths. You get better value there. But I would love to see a flex DPS come in so that you have a combination of Suna. You have a combination of Suna, Dalton, and whomever flex DPS might be, whether it be someone like Caden or so on. As far as Hagen, we've talked about him on previous podcasts. He himself has said that the mistakes that he's made are ones that he understands will follow him for some time. But I've shared this on podcast episodes. For me as a fan, there are lines that I feel one does not cross. Yes, you make mistakes and everyone is deserving of a second chance, but it's not something that I myself could get behind. And I mean, I know that he's not the only one. I think the entire gaming scene has things that it needs to evolve with. But as a Vancouver Titans fan, it would be difficult for me to go and cheer him on. And if that's a fault of mine, I'll accept it. But I'm sorry, I have a daughter. And the way I view things right now, there are again, lines that should not be crossed. You also brought up sort of the need for a proper Lucio, and Karkar isn't cutting it. I wouldn't necessarily fault Karkar completely. The trouble I have, and I wonder if someone has a personality. So we hear in Titan Scored, and we see online that Karkar is kind of quiet or shy. Even when we were sort of seeing Cam stay, it sort of came across that he was sort of laid back or sort of that calm sort of personality. And I kind of wonder if maybe does a disservice for him in the current hero pool, or at least within this particular team. I'm all about the outright aggression. I'm all about playing with your foot on the gas, and I don't necessarily know if that's sort of where he resides. But the other thing we have to consider, and it's sort of what I talked about earlier, when we look at the sum of the parts that are available to the Vancouver Titans as they have them today, there is definitely a disconnect between either the tank line and the support line. There is a gap, and that gap is to whom it would fall with. Is it on the tank line, spreading support too thin? Is it the support line, sitting too far back? Very difficult for us to really ascertain. I think we need more time to see that. I believe the problem is somewhat on the tank line right now, but I also feel that some of that has to do with the communication that may or may not be happening. And again, I think for us, we're going to be evaluating this well beyond May. As to whether or not the Vancouver Titans are going to go and look at signing more players, I'd like to think they will, but I have absolutely no indication that will take place. Also, Rex, thank you for that sub. It is the first time our sort of new alert has happened on stream. It was something I just quickly whipped together prior to this. This is a budget operation, just like the team that we look to support each and every week. Anyhow, the Vancouver Titans themselves, having lost against the Houston Outlaws today, are guaranteed one of two positions in the May Mayhem tournament, either 12th or 13th. So whether it's 12 or 13 only matters to, I think, who picks the first map going into the first play-in, so the qualifier play-in, which is the first match on Friday. Now, when that will be, we don't know. The Overwatch League has yet to release the schedule. But the way the May Melee, May Mayhem, the May Melee, too many Mays, too many M's for alliteration, standings exist as of right now, as I believe the Toronto Defiant are currently sitting in the 12th spot, and the Vancouver Titans sitting in 13. It will be very interesting if that actually plays out, and the Battle of Canada is essentially the two teams at the bottom of the standings in the month of May, playing it out for the right to go and potentially get beat up by someone else later on Friday. The other oddity, and I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. I only started sort of looking at the standings just sort of minutes before we went live here. This May Melee tournament has the Toronto Defiant, at least as one of the teams, it could be more, playing less matches than a team like the Vancouver Titans. So the Vancouver Titans play 4 matches in this tournament. And right now their record is 0-3. The Toronto Defiant are currently sitting at 0-2. And they only have one more match, a match tomorrow. So again, I can't quite wrap my mind around how you have a tournament set up in such a way that you have teams playing such an unbalanced schedule that some won't have played the same number of matches. Like, it's really weird. And maybe it's just math. I haven't spent much time trying to figure out why the structure is as it is, but it is weird. As far as sort of listening to this podcast, I appreciate you obviously subscribing and tuning in. We're, I mean, you obviously already know, we're loyal to a fault. Doesn't necessarily mean we're always happy with what the team is necessarily up to, the organization is up to. You've probably also seen the fact that there are times when I pull very few punches, but at the end of the day, I mean, we as sort of Titans fans, those that have been here sort of from the get-go, we have been through some great times. We've been through some really rough times. And ultimately, it's the fact that we're sort of sticking through it together is what sort of, makes this more enjoyable. I'm also obviously completely understanding of those that have obviously taken off. I've seen more people now cheering for like the Washington Justice, who today did not do so well, but signed Stitch in Janu. We know Slime's now in Seoul, and so there's fans sort of following the former roster around. But then we also have some new fans, those that have followed, someone like KSA, who has actually a pretty big following, or Suna, or even those from Second Wind. Like, again, I think we're seeing sort of the evolution of Titans sort of fan, or the Force of Nature family, as we call it. So here we are, end of Saturday. Vancouver Titans got a rough beating. And they go into the Philadelphia Fusion tomorrow to hopefully see what a really good team is up to. I'd like to suggest that the Vancouver Titans can learn from this experience, but I'm already seeing some worrying signs from the players themselves. And I'm not going to knock them for being candid. I actually appreciate the candidness from them. But you're seeing players, publicly share, like Rolf, apologizing on Twitter for not doing well. You have Shredlock, who's sharing the positivity that fans are supporting, and saying, like, I am so sorry to disappoint you. I don't think players themselves have anything to apologize for. They are doing their best in a real tough situation. They have been brought in to a storm. I mean, for lack of a better, descriptor, the situation is stormy. The waters are rough. The boat is taking on water. Some might suggest it has sunk. In fact, if you listen to our podcast, you know that we had a bonus episode that we defined as Titanic. And we had implied that the ship was going down, having hit an iceberg. It's a difficult situation to have to come into. On top of that, it's not like you have been given much opportunity to sort of get to know your team very well. The pandemic has sort of prevented that. Everyone is playing from all these disparate locations around the world. 4 of the 6 players are here in North America. One is in France, the other one's in the Saudi Arabia. And again, just with time zones alone, it makes it much more difficult to get these players together so that they can grow as a team. I'm not a person that it takes much time to spend on his own in the competitive scene when it comes to Overwatch, but esports in general. But growing up, I played a number of traditional sports, as many people do, and I can speak to some of my more successful team experiences about teams where we played together for quite a long time. We developed chemistry. We knew what each other was capable of doing, and we would go and do our best to sort of pick up for our teammates, because we knew they would do that for us equally. And there is so much that can be said about that chemistry that unfortunately is lacking here. It's going to take time, and that's something that we're going to have to experience. But yeah, it is difficult as a fan, and again, I'm a parent. I'm a little older. It's hard for me to see these kids just say, "I'm so sorry, I let you down." No, he didn't. It's a video game. It should be for fun. And I get that in the competitive scene, you're at the pinnacle of your Overwatch career right now. My hope is that for these players, they can use this opportunity to not only get through this season, but then to take it to another level next season, whether it's here in Vancouver with the Titans or potentially with another team. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, I imagine if my daughter, who is nowhere near into video games quite yet, was in, something similar, I would be gutted as a parent. And I mean, they're not even my kids, and I'm somewhat gutted as a fan. I also have seen some of the things that people have said, obviously, in Titans Court, in some respect, RSP Court, although we're a little tighter when it comes to running that particular ship. I see it on social. Like, I'm not entirely sure what people were expecting. Like, there's so many comparables to, I can't believe you got rid of this roster. I mean, the league itself does it. Like, the league continues to trot out statistics about, the Vancouver Titans, like on Kings Row, are this and this record, or on Volskaya, they have the third fastest time, and on Rialto, they have it. I'm like, but that's great that the Titans hold that time, but it's not like the one league has a whole lot of history so that you can say it's the team of such and such. But then why don't you say such and such version of the Vancouver Titans hold this record? I mean, you think about traditional sports. When it comes to records, team records, it is always inferred as to a particular season or a particular year. If a specific player holds a record, that's fine, but it also ties to a season. But in the Overwatch League, again, they're so young, they're trying to go and celebrate those triumphs, but they also don't want to showcase the fact that we don't have a whole lot of time under our belt here. Well, the difficulty is that when you have the league doing something like that, there are some casual fans who then see the Vancouver Titans as like, well, they were good and now they're not. I don't understand why. There was actually someone who jumped into Titans Core today who was talking about, I put real money. I bet some money on the Vancouver Titans. And what are you talking about? They will completely replace their roster. Well, first and foremost, if you're betting on anything, whether it be sports, esports, the type of weather that we're going to have, I don't really concern myself with what it is you're betting on. It is very important that when you're putting that real money down, you make some extremely educated guesses. And even guessing, I would be apt to say, is not good. Like, this is worrisome that there are people out there putting serious money down, not knowing that the Vancouver Titans roster has changed. But even then, to say, they had, a decent record, and this is like, there's far too much transience that occurs in esports. I mean, players change, meta changes, rosters change. Like, there is just too much. I would never look to bet money on the Overwatch League. But to my earlier point, I feel that at some point in time, people need to realize that this is an entirely new roster, and the roster has a purpose. The roster that the Vancouver Titans have has a purpose to grow and develop. I'm not going to go and tell you that the Vancouver Titans saying that they're going to truly support the Tier 2 scene is them with this current roster. Whether they wanted to support the Tier 2 scene or not mattered very little. There was only so many options available to them, and if they wanted to continue within the league this season. If they truly want to support the Tier 2 scene, it's what we're going to then subsequently see this organization do, whether it to have an academy team of some sort or to further sort of embrace the local market. There has been talk that the Vancouver Titans are looking to go, and I think with the partnership that they just recently announced with Pizza Hut, actually have a local tournament or some form of Overwatch scene, and that's cool and all. I mean, like, that's good for the community. But if that's suggesting we're supporting sort of the Tier 2 scene, I'm not entirely sure that's it. I think to truly support the Tier 2 scene, you actually have to go and put money down. You gotta put cold hard cash into something that helps develop, whether it be a farm team, academy team, or a mechanism to really grow Overwatch. And if it's a regional thing, that's fine. I mean, if you were to go and, let's say, have to regionally say in Vancouver, we're going to go embrace a scene, we run our own sort of, league or whatever it might look, and I don't even know if that's possible with the way the Overwatch League has a lock on everything. But do something like that. That's truly embracing the scene. So again, I went off the rails here, but to go back to that point, this roster is what it is. It is the response to, unfortunately, a catastrophic event that took place organizationally. The previous roster is no more. And whether it be whomever's fault, it matters very little. Unfortunately, life has gone on, and now we've got a group of kids who are coming together doing a tough thing, and that's play in front of people who already have these high expectations. A league that continues to reinforce what the expectations might have been, not what they now should be. And then, in turn, see and hear some of the things that, we as fans, unfortunately, share without maybe fully understanding the impact. So you have someone like Rolf or Shredlock or whomever, trying to, take the L and apologize. Like, I remember the first week, it gutted me, but it was a nice sort of thing to see where the players and the coaches were engaging. But now it's like, man, you don't need to apologize. Totally appreciate the sentiment there. I totally get what you're trying to say. We you support us. We need to perform for you. For me, go out, have some fun. I have no problem if the Vancouver Titans were to actually almost loosen up a little bit. We saw that today with the Houston Outlaws, where was it Linkser, Jesky, trying to think who else was going off in-game chat the entire time. And at some point, someone said that hydration was throwing, and KSA, actually responded, real. I would like to see the Vancouver Titans sort of, maybe as players sort of share some of the personality loose and have some fun. Like, you're going to get probably beaten more than you're going to do the beating, and that's perfectly fine. You're going to grow and eventually evolve. I mean, if the Boston Uprising can win a match, pretty sure the Vancouver Titans will be able to do it as well. But you're, to use a sports term, gripping the stick a little too hard. You're gripping the bat a little too hard. It's something that unfortunately doesn't result in good things in the long term. And I think ultimately, trying to play and be a little more relaxed may help. And I say that because I'm not even in the competitive scene. The couple Team RSP show matches we've had, I've taken it somewhat seriously, and I'm apologizing to the team that I'm playing with in real time, but I'm there having fun. At the end of the day, it is a video game. Rex, I think Shredlock's a great player, just wants to give great performances, but you pointed out before there's a lot of miscommunication, and the most important thing about being a main tank is probably communication. And it is. The main tank role, you think about it, I often refer to sort of Reinhardt as being this godlike figure who rests the world on his shoulders. What's the answer to any problem? More Reinhardt. I've said this multiple times. But when you think about your role as a main tank here, your role is to absorb damage. I mean, in the traditional sense, you're there with a huge, hit pool to be able to go and take the beating. At the same time, you're there to try to, sort of give a beating. You've put great pressure in your performance on the team that stands behind you, especially your support line, because your support line is going to be investing a lot of, their time and ability into keeping you alive. And if you have miscommunication, if you happen to go left and your team were to go right, not only is your team now more at risk because you're not there to keep them safe, you're equally at risk because you no longer have the team there to keep you safe. And it is a big position to be in. When we think about the Titans of last year, there was often this statement, and it very well may true, is that Bumper is a feeder. Bumper is absolutely nothing with the team that supports him. And the funny thing is that until the Vancouver Titans of last year, that sort of runaway roster, got into the league, there truly wasn't a roster, I think, that you could go and sort of, take one player out and everything sort of would fall apart. Like, nothing was really built as like a house of cards per se. But with the Vancouver Titans, we started to see sort of the cards, start to sort of struggle. Bumper comes out of play, you put in Tizzy. Tizzy didn't necessarily have the same capability to perform and communicate and coordinate with the team previous. And the hive mind is maybe a little less strong. But while Bumper is there, maybe the shift in meta with the introduction of Orisa as being a tank that's quite frankly might not have been a strength, became problematic. But the hive mind still exists. Like, the team knows how he wants to play, and they can sort of work around that. And there is already that communication. What is unsaid, the team knows what's going to do. Like, when Bumper started to meme, there's no way the team didn't expect that it was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen. They almost empowered him to do it and encouraged him to do it. And conversely, Bumper also knew, where his team was at any given time. And that's, credit to him. But it's not just Bumper. You had Janu, being the perfect complementary player to having a main tank like Bumper. Bumper, is full on the gas, and Janu's the much more sort of cautious, calculated approach. You looked at the support line with Slime and Twilight. Slime was able to go and not only contribute from a damage perspective, But he was able to go and rescue as need be, and in Twilight being sort of the precise sort of play from the back. And then when you look at sort of the damage, I mean, Haxall, I mean, he in himself was a player who unfortunately was more often or not handcuffed by meta. And then you had a combination of sort of Stitch, Silmansu, and again, complementary, although I really wish we would have seen more Stitch Haxall before obviously the the catastrophic impact that took place middle of the season. So let's look at this current roster. I mean, let's say Shredlock is this great player and could very well be unleashed. Phenomenal. But we've seen in a few matches that we've watched him play in that when he has sort of put the foot in the gas, our sort of support line hasn't been sufficient to sort of keep him up. KSA, maybe not as complementary to the playstyle of Shredlock, and that might be something that can develop over time. The jury is not out. I'm not completely, of the mindset that this is a problem. But there is something that sort of needs to change. The communication coordination, that might help, and I think it will. There are coachable aspects of this, but then even with that in play, and once that exists, that's when we can sort of further ascertain, do these players, each complement each other. I actually want to sort of share something my brother shared, his feedback having watched the match today, and he had said that it felt to me like the Vancouver Titans were playing a game of mystery heroes. And you've heard us actually refer to this in sort of previous live streams, previous podcasts, where it's kind of like they don't really know what they're going to get. They're a little bit out of sync. And that really kind of felt true, especially today. Even though they played, like the heroes they rolled out with, the only time they switched was, essentially in panic time, trying to get to a point and such. But it still felt like they weren't entirely sure necessarily how to play each hero in complementary fashion to the other picks around them. And that's maybe the lack of hive mind that we're so accustomed to seeing here as a Vancouver Titans fan, but it was problematic. Now, my brother also then further went on to say that what the Vancouver Titans need is him and I to go, aggressive main tank. So if you've ever run into my brother and I playing Overwatch, me as Reinhardt, him as Winston, there is a good chance that he and I are spawn camping the other team while our support line and damage are panically trying to tell us to return and group up. We both play sort of W key only, and we have, good fun. But I mean, neither one of us are playing competitively. If we happen to get, those two characters and mystery heroes, heaven help the team in front of us and heaven help our team around us. But it's interesting to see how others react. Like I think far too many people go into this game as if every match that you play has to have a particular system, a particular meta, a particular way about it. I agree, in the competitive scene, there's a requirement for structure, but when you're playing quick play, mystery heroes, arcade, whatever the heck it happens to be, it really needs to be about fun. It needs to be you just, having a good time, just, clicking heads and swinging hammers. And so my brother and I play that aggressive style. But if you and anyone out there were to suggest that maybe, let's say, Shredlock is a feeder, and I've seen those comments, we need to see Light Force and Olo CDN out there, because us two, we would be like the frickin' buffet. Man, those that play against us, they feed on main tank carcasses all day long, but boy, do we have a lot of fun, when the heavies to the fight. Oh, man. So here we are. The end of a tough Saturday. It is going to be interesting to see how the Vancouver Titans perform tomorrow against the Fusion. It's a little bit later start time. It is possible it starts early. It's possible it starts late. As we already all know, when it comes to watching your favorite team in the Overwatch League, nothing is appointment viewing, only the league itself. So unless you play at 12 noon, who knows when you actually play. And then all we all know from there is the Vancouver Titans will be playing on Friday. And they will be playing someone. They will be playing in that 12-13th match, and if they happen to win, then one of the teams from, 7, 8, 9, and 10, 8, 9, 10, 11 get to choose who they play. So it's kind of weird. So it's not like lowest seed, first seed, and that's, I think, because it's an unbalanced schedule in that respect. So the team with the best record chooses first, and then subsequent teams, boom, 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 and whoever's left over is going to be playing, the 11th seed, and then from there, it's sort of how things will go on. But That's only for May. Who knows what June will be? It'll be like, the June Jamboree or whatever the heck they decide to call it. June Jambalaya? I don't know. But the Overwatch League continues to trot on in uncertain times as they happen to be. So unless anyone here who's watching has some further questions, comments, or considerations to share, I think I might be looking to shut down a little bit earlier. I'd hope Sam or Omni might swing through. Obviously, everyone is busy with their day-to-day, but I'm going to be continuing to do this each and every week, 6 p.m., the day after, or the sort of evening after of the Vancouver Titans match. We'll be doing it again tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll have at least an understanding who the Vancouver Titans are going to be playing come Friday, as it looks to be currently the Toronto Defiant. I think the Defiant play the Shock, if I recall, so I don't see how the Defiant pull that one off. And it is, I guess, also possible the Vancouver Titans win against the Fusion. I mean, anything is possible. Donnie Lucifer, top of the morning to you as well. But we are in some crazy times. So for those of you who happen to continue to play Overwatch, may you have all the success in the world playing in quick play, arcade, competitive, wherever it happens to be. If you are waiting out until Overwatch 2, that's perfectly fine. My hope is it comes this year because I have a bet on the line with Sam, and if I lose, RSP is going full basketball for an entire episode, and basketball is sure dead to me. I also want to again thanks Rex17 for that sub today. You are the first sub with our new alert that I had created. Budget podcast, budget stream, budget alerts. But you also have access to some podcast lore. The sub emote for our stream is representative of when all breaking news happens when it comes to Overwatch, Activision Blizzard, as well as the Overwatch League and the Vancouver Titans. That emote was one that our listeners in our Ready Set Pwn or RSP Cord had suggested. We actually still have space for a few more. I just wanted to ensure that there was one for everyone to use, because the way Twitch affiliates work, if you didn't know, is there's sort of 3 different tiers of subscriptions that you can have. This is sort of the one for everyone. There's a subsequent tier at $9.99, and I think it's like $24.99 for the tier 1, tier 3. But I do plan on getting a few more made. Again, budget podcast, budget stream means I am doing it myself with the tools that I have access to. And considering my Microsoft Paint skills are horrible, you can appreciate how much effort, time, and work goes into trying to put something together, such as the Wednesday emote that we have for our stream. So for everyone who did tune in, thank you for tuning in. As I said, we'll be back at this tomorrow, not next week, tomorrow, 6 p.m. on Sunday, to see what the Vancouver Titans will have provided us as far as a performance against the top-rated Philadelphia Fusion. So on behalf of Omni at OmniStrife, Sam at Another Sam Chan, myself, Chris at Lightforce, thanks for tuning in. Carry on the conversation with us in Discord. RSP Cord's good place to be. We're pretty low-key. While we do run a tight ship when it comes to some of the conversations that might take place in some of the other team Discords out there. It's a phenomenal community, and you can learn more about everything to do with the Vancouver Titans by going to discord.io/readysetpwn. That's discord.io/readysetpwn. And you can find us online, readysetpwn.com, at readysetpwn, pretty much on every social media platform. If you ever want to reach out to us with comments, you can go to voicelink.fm/readysetpwn, and you can drop a voice message, send a text message, and you can email us, feedback@readysetpwn.com. I mean, we're pretty much accessible. DMs are open on the RSP Twitter account. We want to hear from you, and where we can, we'll try to provide you further context and insight as we get it. So I'm going to sign this live stream off with those magical 2 words some of you have been waiting for, and you already know they happen to be catchphrase.